Alrighty. What level am I actually in woodworking? Right, level that. That is actually a lot of fucking woodworking. Get level 100. Bow is the way to go for me. Do we actually kill a grizzly now? Oops. Oh no. Why though? I don't see the problem. You should be fine. Oh, Dungeons sind dazugekommen. Noch im Leveln, bin gerade mal Level 21. Machen wir da jetzt nicht so einen Stress draus.
Yes, this is the key. This is... I'm sorry if this is becoming repetitive, but such is the nature of science. Recover the astral...
Fühlt sich halt nur, keine Ahnung. Kleine Quality of Life Improvements, aber so einen extremen Unterschied zu Dings fühle ich jetzt nicht. Ah, jetzt müsste ich halt erstmal Richtung Endgame.
The light of the covenant shines within you. Boah, keine Ahnung. Auch jetzt gerade so legit alleine zocken ist
Alge war ja hier noch auf dem Server mit bei, aber der scheint irgendwie nicht mehr online zu kommen, zumindest hier nicht. Somit keine Ahnung. Komplett alleine ist halt irgendwie gerade langweilig. Gestern hat mir halt den kompletten Spielspaß zerstört, dass in den Ebenen hier keine Mobs gespawnt sind. Ich deswegen nicht questen konnte. Gibt es eigentlich schon irgendwelche Builds, die sie gemacht haben? Für Path of Exile? Yeah, I don't know. Bin am Überlegen, back zu Taki. So, auch das hier ist halt solo mega langweilig, Mann. Die Quests sind so repetitive, innerhalb von einer halben Stunde habe ich jetzt schon gar keinen Bock mehr, weil ich einschlafe. Also ich habe halt jetzt auch schon massiv anderes Zeug gelevelt. Hm. Ja. Nur für was? Wenn ich solo weiter hier rumdaddel. Ne. Gar kein Bock. Hm. Was geht denn in der neuen League? Hm.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Welcome to our live stream and thank
Many centuries ago, our people traveled to this accursed continent. We return to reclaim our lost relics. But Rayclast grips its secrets tightly. We must wrench them from its grasp. You know violence. We know trade. Retrieve our relics and we'll strike a deal. We will follow the path of our forebears to discover their unknown fate. They wait.
Oh, das sah geil aus. Das hier.
They wait, shrouded in darkness, for one who may finally challenge them. Wealth and power will be yours, should you survive our expedition.
In the Expedition League, you will meet a group of Kalgurans who have set out on an expedition to investigate the fate of their ancestors and recover special ruined artifacts they left behind. The ancient Kalgurans underestimated the dangers of Rayclust, and this new expedition is no exception. They need your help to protect them from the undead that rise at their expedition sites. As you travel through Rayclust, you'll encounter the Kalgurans at sites they believe their ancestors attempted to settle in the past. By the time you get there, they will have marked the site with signs indicating where chests are buried, holes indicating where their ancestors lie, and will have possibly unearthed some remnants of past Kalguran settlement. Due to the unique nature of Rayclust, the Kalgurans have found that the most effective way to excavate these sites is with explosives. And that's where you come in. You'll place a chain of explosives across the expedition site, carefully planning what each blast is going to unearth. Once you push the plunger, any undead freed by the explosions rise from the ground and the slaughter begins. Some of these fallen Kalgur are more difficult and rewarding than others, and have been indicated with special markers. Once you have defeated the army of undead, you're free to open all of the chests you unearthed and claim your rewards. It's up to you to decide where to place the chain of explosives to maximize your gains. Do you unearth a lot of monsters? Do you unearth more special monsters? Or do you go for the chests and try to avoid combat? The ancient Kalguran explorers built structures on Rayclust, and you may encounter remnants of these at excavation sites. These remnants have various modifiers on them that, when destroyed, apply to monsters and chests unearthed from that explosion onwards. Remnants greatly increase drops, but have some very difficult modifiers like immune to physical damage. You'll need to be very careful with your decision of which remnants to chain your explosives through, as they substantially ramp up the difficulty and rewards of the encounters. Speaking of rewards, there's a lot of cool stuff to find. Alongside valuable equipment and currency items are Kalguran artifacts and logbooks, which we'll talk about soon. The Kalguran traders have made this expedition to Rayclust in order to recover their ruined artifacts. There are many different types of artifacts, and each of the Kalgurans is interested in a different set of them, with a unique way they want to trade them from you. For this expansion, we really wanted to play with the idea of having NPCs that want to trade with you in different ways. So we have themed their behaviors around the concepts of gambling, bartering, upselling, and exchanging. Let's meet the Kalgurans. Tuyen is a mercurial trader who maintains a positive outlook as long as he can, but if you cross a line, his temper changes quickly. Tuyen offers you items with unreasonably high prices, but he's happy to haggle. You can always buy the item at the price he's offering, but if you offer a lower price, he might accept it, counteroffer, or withdraw the item entirely if he is offended by your lowball. He also occasionally sells currency items, so it's worthwhile keeping some of the artifacts he's looking for on hand just in case you see an opportunity. Grog is an average man pushed into Rayclust's dangers. He's helpful, concerned, and a bit fearful. He is very happy for you to do the fighting so that he can stay safe on the sidelines. He loves making deals and trying to upsell you. If you buy one of the items that Grog offers, he'll try to offer you a more complex deal where he improves the item via crafting. If you accept this deal, he'll try to upsell you again and again until you eventually walk away with your purchase. If you can't afford one of these incremental upgrades, you can leave and come back later with enough ruined artifacts to cover the cost. Because you don't get to supply your own starter item for this process, and have to select an item with promise from the range that he offers, his incremental crafting upgrades are priced rather cheaply. Gwenin is a cynical gambler who claims that luck depends on how hard you believe. So you really need to convince yourself that you're going to get that headhunter. If you don't, it's your fault. Gwenin shows you a set of base types with unknown properties. When you gamble by buying one, you'll receive a random item of that base type back. It could easily be a random magic item that you have no use for, but can sometimes be a valuable rare or unique item. It's probably best to prioritize gambling on base types that are most relevant to your character. Once you have exhausted all the items that interest you, it's possible to use a specific new currency item to re-roll the gamble window to a set of new items of your current level. Sometimes a base type shows up that is a lot more expensive than it would otherwise be, and gambling on this item has a higher expected value than normal. You're taking the risk though that it could still be junk. Danig, Warrior Skald, is the heart of the expedition, its brave leader and lawmaster. Danig is interested in specific types of ruined artifacts and wants to trade these from you for a variety of options, such as currency that lets you reroll vendor inventories, logbooks, or artifacts that other Kalguran traders are looking for. You can talk to the traders in the wild, in town, or in your hideout. They grant you access to your expedition locker, which is like the heist locker, a lockbox for League-specific items, which can be accessed in all 3 places also. We're adding the affinity system to these lockers. Among the many relics of the ancient Kalgurans you might find at their expedition sites are logbooks. These ancient books chronicle the locations that their ancestors visited in their exploration of Rayclust. A logbook item can be rolled to have a set of explicit mods, like an endgame map. Each location within the logbook has its own implicit mods, as well as a theme that controls what types of remnants can be found there. Talk to Danig in your hideout and give him a logbook you have found to go on an expedition to one of the locations it describes. These are all exotic places that no exiles have ever traveled to before. Just like how a blighted map was one giant blight encounter with no natural monsters, the expedition you go on from a logbook is one giant expedition. Expeditions from logbooks are not only different because of their large size, but because there are special objects that you can interact with using explosives. For example, trees that contain monsters or items, passageways that reveal chests or bosses, and so on. Speaking of bosses, there are some formidable ones for you to seek out, and a set of valuable new unique items and base types that can only come from expedition content.
Bosse, die man wieder nur einmal in der ganzen League sieht.
Not from Rayclust, so the items do not have the same defensive properties that ours do. Instead of armor, evasion, and energy shield, they have ward. This new base type is a pair of boots that grants ward and can get mods that improve it. The way that ward works is that you have a certain amount of it, and that amount is fully deducted from the first incoming hit that you receive. Your ward is then disabled and takes 5 seconds to re-enable. At that point, the next hit you receive is substantially mitigated in the same way. It's quite a different style of defensive property and works very well in conjunction with systems like evasion, block, or dodge. As the undead enemies you unearth in expedition encounters are fallen Kalguran explorers, they also have a ward rather than traditional defenses. This unique helmet allows you to go all in with ward as a defensive option for your character. It causes all increases to energy shield to affect your ward instead, grants you a bunch of ward, and helps it recover faster. This other unique helmet is also on a new base type that grants ward instead of other defense types, but its properties don't interact with ward. Instead, it prevents you from dealing critical strikes and grants you Battle Mage, which adds spell damage equal to the damage of your main hand weapon. The new base types and uniques I showed you here are just some of the ones you'll be able to discover when you play next week. So that's the Expedition League. Each of the developers I have spoken to has liked a different aspect of it. I've approached new skills in Path of Exile expansions is to make a bunch of gems themed around an entirely new build or dramatically augmenting a few existing builds. The blood skills in the Ultimatum expansion are a good example of this. While this approach is great in terms of creating interesting new builds, it doesn't always affect every character game-wide. In order to achieve this big metagame shakeup, we've come up with a crazy idea for the Expedition expansion. Adding a gigantic pile of new gems at once, spread among as many different playstyles as possible. Each of these gems can of course be used by many different classes, but we use the list of 19 Ascendancy classes for inspiration when planning these gems. Our goal here is that regardless of which build you're playing, there will be new gems that you can add to your character. Let's go through the 19 new skill and support gems. The Earthbreaker support gem can be linked to any slam skill. Upon use, it summons an ancestor totem that uses that slam on your behalf. In this example, we've created a build that summons multiple ancestor totems that each wield Tectonic Slam. As you can see, this build covers a large area in Fiery Death while you get to stay out of harm's way. This is a powerful option for chieftains in particular due to the various totem bonuses available on their Ascendancy passive tree. Adept players will also be wondering if the Earthbreaker support allows you to create leap-slamming totems, and the answer is absolutely. As with other ancestor totems, the Earthbreaker support also provides a buff to you, granting some increased area of effect with melee skills. Rage Vortex provides a new way to consume your rage, unleashing a whirling vortex that rapidly hits enemies within its range. It gains damage and area of effect based on how much rage was sacrificed. The vortex slows down when enemies survive being hit by it, causing it to deal intense damage to tough targets. While you can only have one Rage Vortex active at a time, characters such as Berserkers who are able to generate a lot of rage quickly will find it a great way to augment their damage output. Bone Shatter strikes your enemies with a forceful blow. If an enemy is stunned by this attack, a powerful shockwave is released. The area of effect of the shockwave is determined by the duration of the stun you inflicted. Each time you use Bone Shatter against an enemy, you take physical damage yourself and gain a trauma stack. The more stacks you have, the more damage Bone Shatter will deal to both you and your enemies. This self-damage mechanic makes the Juggernaut the ideal class for the skill, because they have easy access to lots of armor to mitigate the downside. Also, the Juggernaut has ascendancy passives that grant increased stun duration, which help make sure the shockwave is as large as possible. Defiance Banner is a new purely defensive banner skill. While you carry the Defiance Banner, it increases the armor and evasion of nearby allies while reducing the critical strike chance of nearby enemies. It also gains stages while carried near enemies and can be placed on the ground to enhance its effects. When the Defiance Banner is placed, it inflicts a taunt on enemies for a duration based on the number of stages the banner had accumulated while it was carried. Enemies affected by this taunt also deal less damage to all targets. The next new skill is Shield Crush, which swipes your shield towards enemies and sends out forceful waves of damage based on the stats of your shield. These waves can shotgun enemies with up to 2 hits at once, so while Shield Crush is great against groups, it's also effective against single targets and can be used alongside Shield Charge and Spectral Shield Throw. We've improved both of these skills so that the overall aggressive shield build is more powerful. The new Behead support gem can only support strike skills and is basically like a mini headhunter. When a supported strike kills a rare enemy, you'll steal one of its modifiers. Obviously, this gem can't be as crazy as the full headhunter experience, so it comes with some restrictions. Stolen modifiers can persist for 20 seconds, and slaying another rare enemy will replace the modifier you have active. The Behead support gem also grants you more damage against enemies on low life. In conjunction with the Slayer's Bane of Legends Ascendancy passive, this bonus really embraces the execution theme of the Behead support. Storm Rain is a new bow skill that fires arrows that stick into the ground. These arrows periodically pulse with lightning damage that arcs to nearby arrows. This skill works very well with multiple projectiles because you can quickly set up a large patch of lightning death.
Das sieht interessant aus.
Existing ballista skills in Path of Exile pick their own targets, like sentry guns do. They'll start shooting immediately and will generally target the closest enemies. While this behavior is usually great, sometimes you want fine control over what your ballistas will fire at. The focused ballista support gem causes your ballistas to pick the same targets as you, and they will only fire when you fire your own ranged weapon. It also makes the ballistas fire a lot faster than they otherwise would. This support gem allows you to effectively focus fire on specific enemies such as bosses. Explosive Concoction is quite a novel skill. It introduces several new concepts that haven't been explored with skills before. Here you can see the Pathfinder throwing an explosive projectile at monsters. Firstly, you may notice that the Pathfinder isn't holding any weapons. This is because Explosive Concoction is the very first ranged skill that can and must be used unarmed. It's also the first skill that directly interacts with the benefits provided by your flasks. When you throw your Explosive Concoction onto a targeted area, it deals fire damage and uses available charges from your Ruby, Sapphire, and Topaz flasks to grant bonuses based on what flask charges were used. The skill still works even if you don't have the appropriate flasks or charges to consume, but correctly managing your flask setup can greatly enhance the power of this skill. What we really love about this gem is that it brings to life the idea of throwing your flasks at enemies and having them explode. In conjunction with the flask-focused benefits provided by the Pathfinder's Ascendancy passive skills, we're really excited to see what new playstyles are enabled by this gem. This is the Ambush skill. It teleports you up to an enemy, blinds them, and exerts your next one-handed melee attack. This exerted attack has a high critical strike chance and multiplier. In addition to this helping your assassinations, you can also use Ambush to quickly re-engage targets after dashing away. Voltaxic Burst grants a buff that counts down to 0, triggering a burst of lightning damage around you with a portion of that damage converted to chaos damage. Enemies slain by your Voltaxic Burst will also explode, dealing chaos damage around them based on their maximum life. You can stack up many Voltaxic Bursts on yourself at the same time. Consider using duration modifiers to modify the timing of the explosion so that you can cast the skill from safety and then move into a strategic position before it explodes. When you use Blade Trap, you throw out a mechanical device with 2 copies of your weapon attached. These blades spin rapidly in a circle a set number of times, dealing damage to anything they pass through. When dual wielding, the trap rotates faster but deals damage based on both weapons. Because it's a trap, Blade Trap behaves a little differently to other attack skills by operating independently of your attack speed. This means you'll have some interesting itemization choices to make and focusing more on damage modifiers rather than the typical focus of maximizing attack speed. Summon Reaper creates a single powerful minion that uses fast melee physical attacks which cause bleeding. While the Reaper is active, you can use the skill again to direct the Reaper to a specific location, dealing a powerful attack along its path. The Reaper wants to be your only minion. It reduces the life and damage of your other minions, and will consume them to heal itself and gain damage and speed buffs. When designing this new skill for the Necromancer, we wanted to explore the idea of having a single ultimate minion. While there were ways to somewhat achieve this before, the Reaper is quite different in its abilities and interactions with other minions. It also feels much more active and directly under your control. One quick note though, the Reaper will absolutely eat your animated Guardian if you're not careful. Forbidden Rite is a powerful new spell that fires an exploding chaos projectile at a targeted area. It also targets a selection of enemies in an area around the player's location and fires projectiles at them too. But be careful, Forbidden Rite also inflicts damage on you when cast. If you can find a clever way to mitigate this harmful downside, you'll have devastating and widespread damage at your fingertips.
Sieht fett aus.
The Eye of Winter is a large projectile that fires out a barrage of cold projectiles in a spiral formation as it travels. When it reaches its maximum distance or collides with the terrain, it explodes, firing out even more projectiles in a spiral. This type of skill is one we've been wanting to bring to Path of Exile for a long time, and we felt that this new collection of skills was the perfect place to showcase it. This Inquisitor is using the new Battle Mage's Cry skill, which taunts nearby enemies and exerts your subsequent attacks, causing them to trigger a linked spell in your next melee hit. Here you can see the player taunting enemies with Battle Mage's Cry and using Consecrated Path to teleport to enemies. The slam is exerted, triggering Firestorm to rain down on those enemies. In order to assist with scaling both attack and spell damage, the buff this Warcry provides lets your spell damage apply to your attacks. This property is usually only available on wands and certain unique items. Mana Bond is a somewhat unusual gem in that its source of power relies on your current mana. Upon use, it creates a rune that explodes at a location you're targeting. This explosion can either deal more damage or cover a larger area depending on the state of your mana. The more mana that's missing from your mana pool, the more damage Mana Bond will deal, as it converts a percentage of your missing mana into added lightning damage. The more full your mana pool is, the more area the explosion will cover. This means that being adept at managing your mana pool becomes highly advantageous. For example, having slightly higher mana while clearing a map provides greater clear speed, but when fighting tougher enemies, having a lower current mana amount is better. Absolution has been designed for Guardians as a spell version of Dominating Blow. Absolution deals a damaging shockwave in a targeted area. When it kills an enemy, it summons a Sentinel of Absolution, which also deals damage by casting Absolution itself. The Sentinels also periodically cast a larger version of Absolution on the cooldown. While the Sentinels version of Absolution can't summon even more minions, they are a powerful army to fight against. Spectral Helix throws a spectral copy of your melee weapon which spirals outwards from you, dealing damage to any enemies it passes through. The design of this skill achieves what we always wanted Val's Spectral Throw to be. We thought it was a really fun idea for a skill, but because of the limitations caused by the soul-gathering requirements of Val skills, it wasn't possible to use Val's Spectral Throw as a primary skill. Now that Spectral Helix can live up to this purpose, we've reworked Val's Spectral Throw, which we'll reveal closer to release. One of the other issues that Val's Spectral Throw had was that it didn't work very well in indoors areas. However, Spectral Helix improves upon this, as the projectiles that spiral outwards can also bounce off of walls and proceed to hit enemies, rather than simply disappearing upon collision. Over the last few years, Path of Exile has really suffered from player power creep. As a consequence of trying to make compelling content, each expansion we release either gives players more axes on which to improve their character, more effective skills to use, or ways to craft better and more powerful items. Measuring from closed beta to now, this Expedition expansion is our 30th Path of Exile release. The amount of power creep varies per release, of course, with systems like Ascendancy classes providing, like 20, 30, 40% power creep at once, Like with compound interest, it would only take 8% more player power per expansion from new items, crafting, character systems, item acquisition opportunities, and new skills for player power to grow tenfold since the game has been out. And tenfold is roughly what we measure the increase in player power to be. We may nerf the most out-of-hand cases every launch, but we're only reducing them back down to close to the new baseline. The average Path of Exile character gets more and more powerful. While we do occasionally add new endgame challenges that are appropriate for the current power level of top characters, the rest of the game just becomes relatively easier and easier. Some games handle this by just endlessly and exponentially scaling monster life and damage to counteract player power growth. Eventually, the numbers get too large and you need to crunch them all down again. This is a really cheap approach and makes the game feel like a treadmill where the developers are just turning a knob as they hand you new power, keeping you in the same place forever. We don't want to treat Path of Exile like that, and hence our solutions are more complicated. At the same time, one of the issues is that players will always pick the most powerful way of interacting with any game system, even when that's not actually fun to play. This leads to behaviors like Flask Piano, or the way that everyone just picks support gems that basically add pure damage. As game designers, it is our responsibility to make sure that the most powerful behaviors are in a few seconds of inattention. Response. In fact, it's very interesting to compare the difficulty of League content with that of the base game. For a few years now, we've been shipping difficult leagues where monster life and damage values are a lot higher than the regular monsters that...
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it for today. Watch in wanna call it. Tomorrow come back to Tarkov. Or maybe Path of Exile. I'll see though. I don't know. That I'm off.